Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast, episode 53. My name is Matt Wood, and today I'm here with Kenny, Lynn, Kelsey, and Stefan of Hobo Wine Company. Hobo started about 20 years ago with a couple barrels of Zin, and although they've grown, it's still a family environment. They work in a low-intervention way, farming and making wine responsibly, while helping to ensure others can do the same. We discussed the start of Hobo and the style of wine Kenny was looking to make, farming their own fruit, and how their impact report holds them accountable. Just a quick reminder, there's a link to a Patreon in the show notes if you'd like to support the podcast with a donation to help me keep telling wine stories ad-free. Or you can also help by just telling a friend that you enjoy it. Here we go. Kenny, you grew up with a parent in the wine business, right?
Correct, yeah. My dad has worked at a winery called Domaine St. George for, I think it's maybe 51 years at this point. He still works. He's 80 and he still works at least 40 hours a week, but I'd say generally more.
Okay.
But yeah, so I grew up around there, spent summers doing stuff there, a lot of bottling. But I can remember crushing grapes and some stuff too. But I got mostly stuck with doing the worst type of jobs, like putting capsules on bottles and 8 hours a day on the bottling line.
Was wine something you thought you were going to go into as a youngster?
Definitely not. It was something I think I swore to my dad I would never go into.
Okay.
I was not a fan.
What made you start erring in that direction?
Mostly, so I was living in San Francisco, probably 95 or 96, something like that. And I needed a job, and my dad actually helped me get a part-time job at a place called Cannon Wines, which was kind of like a marketing company. I don't believe they're around anymore, but I got a part-time job shipping out samples and helping them set up tastings. I think they would taste every Friday, or maybe it was every other Friday. Anyway, around wine, but not doing really anything with wine. And they would let me taste with them sometimes, and sometimes I could take some bottles home for the weekend. And I think combination of that experience, being able to taste wines mostly from France at the time, and then listen to these people talk about the wines. And sometimes the producers would come over from Europe and listen to them talk about the wine. It became much more interesting to me than just putting capsules on the bottling line. I hadn't seen that side of wine, even though I'd spent my entire life around it up until that point. And so it got much more interesting. Plus I was old enough to legally drink, and I just started drinking a little bit more wine on my own as well as there. And that's when I started thinking about it as a career path.
So you have to kind of hear some of the stories and just view it in a different way than production line.
Yeah, I think the kind of historical component of wine, and how it's a thing passed on through families, and how regionally specific it is, and how these people really have not just built their own lives, but the lives of their families, and ancestry. All this stuff was intertwined into these, this product. And that was something that just, it wasn't presented to me that way growing up. My dad is not a wine aficionado. He doesn't drink wine at all, really. And so for him, I think he likes the work he does, but it's not, I wouldn't say he has a great passion for drinking wine. And so that part of it wasn't part of it for us growing up.
Mm-hmm. And Lynn, you grew up in Colorado?
Yeah, I did. Yep, Pueblo.
You probably didn't think you were going to be in the wine business either then.
No, not at all. I didn't drink wine until, maybe high school. But the first time I learned about fermentation was in 7th grade. And I came home and asked my mom for a jug of apple juice and took her bread yeast and put it in there and made whatever that is called.
Okay.
And I guess. And had my best friend drink it, and it turned out it did work. She got pretty sick. But I don't know. You want to know how I ended up in this wine world?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's basically, via Kenny. I met Kenny in Colorado, when we were young, like 20, 21. And it's such a long story, it's like 20 years or 30 years really together. So, I went to school at Boulder for several years, dropped out after, having several different degrees and whatnot, and then ended up in San Francisco with Kenny and was like, working in restaurants and was waitressing and like finally starting to make money. And, but then I was like, well, I got to go back to school. So I went back to school at Davis for botany, which I always have been surrounded. Like I grew up, in Colorado, but would go to my granddaddy's farm. He grew cotton and had cows and stuff. And, grew up around agriculture. And so really, really was interested in that and went back to school at Davis. And, the answer is kind of strange because I have a degree in botany. Kenny, got a degree in winemaking and viticulture. And we moved to Santa Cruz. And, I was working at Eco Farm and, I worked there for several years as like a program director and a volunteer director. And I did that. And Kenny was a winemaker. And, basically it just sort of happened organically. One day he came home, he's like, oh, I'm going to make my own wine. And, I'm going to name it Hobo Wine Company. And I'm like, what? It's the craziest idea I've ever heard. But, I'll help. That sounds cool. And so, that's kind of how it happened. It was just like, I didn't have a lot of like forethought about it, but I was definitely like on team us. And so we started doing that. It's like, oh, we need to figure out like how to register a business name. We need to figure out how to sell wine legally. Mm-hmm. And I'm into that stuff. I liked the computer. I can figure stuff out. I like paperwork, as weird as it sounds. And so I think in the beginning, that's really how I helped out. And then we had a family and I stayed home and I just continued to do that stuff. And things come up, it was just like the two of us for the longest time. And you just have to figure out how to, do taxes and, compliance. And there's so much work to do, really. And so I ended up doing that.
So in your mind, what was the inkling to start Hobo?
I was working at this winery in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I had a friend up here whose family had a Zinfandel vineyard in the Dry Creek Valley. I was always a Zinfandel fan. The winery that I was working at in Santa Cruz, we didn't make any Zinfandel. I approached the owner of the winery, my boss, and asked him, hey, like I got this friend, and he's got some grapes, like we could make a Zinfandel. I thought it would be a cool addition to the winery, plus fun to have Zinfandel, and personally that I was interested in it. And he wasn't. He didn't want to do that. Okay. So he was like, "Hey, like, get the grapes, use the winery, but it's your wine." And I actually was not thinking about starting my own project or making my own wine at that point at all. But I really wanted to make that Zinfandel, and that was really the impetus to get it going. Is So we made a couple barrels of wine, and then a couple barrels of wine turns out to be like way more wine than you think it is when you're like tasked with like what to do with it. It's not like a few bottles. Mm-hmm. So then, we had to sell it basically, but then it's like fun making wine. So you want to do it again next year, but you realize you got to sell it, and on and on and on. So
did it just kind of grow in a make wine, sell wine, make a little more wine sort of way?
Yeah, I think for the first couple of years, it was fun. Like the goal was to have fun, and I guess at a certain point, like do something stylistically a little different than what I was getting paid to do. But then we got to a point production wise, like size, where there was a certain amount of stress, I guess, and you're kind of like, well, do we grow this into a real business, or do we like shrink into a just a hobby, like, or there's how seriously do we want to take this? And it looking back at it wasn't like a clear decision. Like I think I think I was like kind of ready to move on in my life, and that might have pushed the decision. Like, okay, like, and then there was like the recession that started in 2007, and so that was like, all right, if I leave my job, there's not going to be another job, so then this has to work.
Okay.
And that was really the at that point the major like shit or get off the pot moment, because I left my job, there were no more jobs, economy was really tough. We had a young family. It's like, this has to work. And then you start looking at the numbers, and it's like, it's got to be bigger to make it work, and like to like maintain our sort of ethics about what we're doing, and like our ideas about wine and our ideas about business. It's got to be bigger. And then we kind of like move towards like, let's make this a real business.
What are some of those ethics for business and wine?
Well, I think at that time the driving one was, I feel like this was like in a sort of post Sideways movie world of wine, and wines had gotten, I might be wrong about this, but it from my perspective at that time, wines got significantly more expensive quickly. And I think we were always focused on trying to bring value, like to make wines that were people like in our income bracket could afford, like our friends could afford, younger people could afford. And so that was probably the big one at that time. We had ideas about agriculture, and we had exposure to organic farming, and that was like important to us too. But we weren't farming anything ourselves at that point. So we could like sort of look for vineyards that were doing better farming and like talk to vineyard owners about organic farming, but we weren't really like doing it ourselves so much. But the idea of like making good wines at reasonable prices, I think was and still is a very, very much like a driving force for like what our business is.
What other grapes did you start expanding to after the couple barrels of Zinfandel?
So Zinfandel was the first year. And then I think in the second year, we made Zinfandel again in Gewürztraminer. There was a Viognier early on. There was some Riesling early on. I think we did a little bit of Cabernet in 2003. So that was all down in the Santa Cruz Mountains, 2002, 3, and 4. And then we moved up here up here being Sonoma County in 2005. And I think like we kind of had a little bit of like a explosion of like small lots of whatever, like, I can't remember. We added a lot of things, and some of it was like a bin, or, like a half ton or a ton or less, whatever, like tiny amounts of, like, I kind of started working with growers up in Mendocino County. And I think in 2006, we like did Valdegui and Carignan, and there was like, let's see, I guess in 2007 or 8, there was no, before that, 7 maybe was the first Pinot Noir. I can't remember. Sorry. There was a lot of grapes. I mean, like we've worked with a lot of different grapes and vineyards over the years, and even now there's still quite a lot in the.
You guys have a few different sort of labels that you're making wine under. Is that an outgrowth of that curiosity, kind of working with maybe some smaller lots and some larger lots, or do you just like to have those labels kind of real focused on a certain area and grape?
Yeah, each of the labels, at least in our heads, kind of has its own like identity. I feel like this is the question that we get, or at least I get asked most of anything about what we're doing.
Okay.
So I should be better at answering it, but really they kind of evolved at different times. Hobo and Banyan were sort of right at the beginning, but then the Folk Machine came next, and so on. And I think what happened was we would start making a couple new wines, and it felt like, and we would sort of think of them as projects in our heads, and then the project felt like new and exciting versus like the other wines we were making, which we were like kind of honing in more, and they felt more established is not the right word, but they felt more like on their way or something. And and so then because of the feeling of newness, we felt like, oh, it needs a new brand. And so we would like come up with basically it was like, they're really like, the brands are really projects. And, retrospectively, you look back 20 years and you're like, well, it doesn't necessarily make as much sense as it felt like it did at the time. But the brands do kind of have their own identities. There's some geographical separation. There's a little bit of price separation on some of them. But I'd say as far as sensibility about wine and ethics about what we're doing, they're the same, and they're made in the same place. We're applying the things that we believe in about wine to all the wines pretty equally at this point, or really at all points.
Mm-hmm. Should have said something about you guys earlier, but would you like to introduce yourselves and say what you do here at Hobo?
I'm Stefan. Work here at Hobo. Been here since 2018.
Okay.
Work in the cellar and in the vineyards that we farm here.
Great.
And I'm Kelsey Freeman. I'm the newest addition to the team. I came on for harvest last year, and they couldn't shake me. I'm still here.
And we're missing one member of the team, I think, today.
Yeah,
also, right?
Connor. He's all, I always like to think that my goal is for everybody to be able to do everything. So we all work in the vineyards. We all work here in the cellar. Everybody participates in tastings, and I don't mean tastings here at the winery, but going out into the world to pour the wines for people. So, we have our maybe sort of specialties, but I'd like to everybody to be able to do a certain amount of everything. So, but Connor's been here, I think, since 2014. Yeah, 2014.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, he's probably been here 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like the rest of us, he's doing everything.
Yeah. Can you tell me about some of the vineyards and farming that you're doing?
Yeah. I haven't added it up lately, but I think we work with 35-ish vineyards.
Wow.
It probably represents about 200 and around 200 acres, something like that.
Okay.
And we have a variety of arrangements, and kind of on one end of the spectrum, buying grapes from growers, where we don't necessarily have a ton of oversight on the vineyard. In that situation, we're probably choosing the vineyard because it's being farmed in a way that we like, but we don't necessarily have a lot of control. And then on the other end of the spectrum, vineyards that we lease and farm ourselves. Including a partnership with a guy named Luke Miller, who's a good friend and one of our main growers, where we do have a lot of oversight in terms of what's going on. We're probably in charge of 70-ish acres.
Okay.
And then in the middle, there are situations where we're not doing any hands-on farming, but we can have conversations with the growers and work together to kind of make changes in the farming if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And those are usually situations where we're the sole buyer of the vineyard, and so our fate is tied closely, and so it's in everybody's best interest to work together like that.
Did you have a different number for the amount of vineyards?
It's about 30, yeah.
Oh. What is it that you look for in either the farming of the vineyard, or just what makes you want to work with a vineyard?
The real deal breaker for me is the people. If it's not a compatible situation, no matter how great the vineyard is, it's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be fun. Especially when you get to harvest and it's everybody's stressed out. If you're already not seeing just in a compatible situation, it's going to be worse at harvest. So I think the people involved is the number one thing. And then after that, farming practices, site location, what's being grown there. I would say those are kind of all the normal things. At this point, we are trying to move everything to being fully certified organic.
Okay.
We have some vineyards that are not that are long-term old relationships, but we're still trying to move them that direction. But we wouldn't at this point take on any new vineyards that aren't either certified at this point or moving towards being certified at this point. We're not seeking any conventionally farmed vineyards anymore. And then obviously within the spectrum of organic farming, there's a range of what's going on, and so we'd be taking a closer look at some of that too, and of course the grapes that are being grown, like what the varieties are. Like it's fun to have small quantities of like little fun things, but there's also a sustainability, like a financial sustainability thing, where sometimes that stuff, it's hard to build a long-term relationship on 2 tons of a fun grape. Like it's fun if it's there and it's available, but the reality I think is that we want really well farmed, I guess, grapes that are at a quantity that's financially sustainable for the grower, and something that like a large amount of consumers are going to be interested in. And that's just like the business part of it. It's just the reality part of it. We want to be able to continue like indefinitely with these vineyards and have the growers rely on us for that income from them too. I got a little off topic there.
No, that's great. You must have pretty long-term relationships then with some of your growers.
Yeah. I think we have growers we've been working with for 15 to 20 years. Most of them I don't think we have very many that we haven't been working with for at least 5+ years. But the bulk of the grapes that we're bringing in, we've probably been working with for 15 vintages at least.
Okay. Have you continued to sort of grow and keep that sort of small winery feel? And it seems like you're able to kind of work with a lot of the same ethos that you did when you started, but at a larger amount now.
I would like to think that that's right. I'm not sure if I know how we did it. I just think that we didn't know how not to do it. Our business is very family oriented, very homegrown, and like neither Lynn or I have any background in any kind of corporate setting, so we don't really know how that works. I think we value people above all else, and so we want to work with people that we like. We want them to hopefully like working here, and I think if that's like the driving, if that's what's important, then it kind of just stays like feeling small. We also despite the fact that like relative to our production size, we actually have a lot of lots that are kind of small too. So it's still somewhat small winemaking. Like we don't have 100,000 gallon tank here that has one wine in it.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you guys are looking forward to for upcoming harvest here, 2024?
Let's see. It'd be, it's always fun every year just getting to see what we end up with. Recently planted some Morved out in Dry Creek area.
Nice.
And got like a half barrel last year. So hopefully just seeing what we end up with this year, it's just fun to see the little projects, how they've kind of been evolving over the years, certain blocks getting, more attention than they did before, and just kind of seeing how they work out vintage after vintage is pretty fun. So
are there any wines that you make that are kind of close to your heart?
Sure. I mean, definitely the Dry Creek Zinfandel. That's a great one. Sauvignon Blanc. I guess that one ends up in kegs most of the time. Yeah, those wines we work pretty close with. And then there's portions within those blocks that end up in larger blends as well. So, yeah.
Kelsey, any fun projects for 2024 harvest?
I think for me, one of the main pieces that I'm excited about is it's like I know how things work here now. Like I knew about the workings from an outer perspective of Hobo for a while, but coming in from a different winery, and it's kind of like the floodgates are open the first harvest, and it's like now I know the lots, and now I know the vineyards and the people and the stories behind a lot of the wine, that there's a lot more personal investment for me.
Okay.
And like I've grown different attachments to different wines, and so I'm excited for them to come through the door again this harvest.
Lynn, you've been making some Chardonnay, haven't you?
Yeah. I do. I make some Chardonnay. I think I figured out last harvest that I've been doing that for 10 years, which surprised me. Yeah, so that's always fun. It's very old, so I don't know, in the heat wave and the drought and whatnot, I don't know. Hopefully, there'll be some to make. But as far as the harvest, though, I'm looking forward to that. I made Sanso last year for the first time. And that turned out really fun. And so I am looking forward to making that as well. But I'm looking forward to the interns. I look forward to the people that we work with. We eat lunch every day, or we try to anyway.
Nice.
And that's always a good time. Yeah, harvest is fun. It's hard work, but it's also exciting.
Kenny, anything you're looking forward to for the 2024 harvest?
I'm looking forward to it starting so that it can end in some ways. But we have a block of Sauvignon that we planted with a guy down in Santa Cruz 4 years ago. So we should see our first small harvest of that, which I think will be interesting. That's a grape I like a lot that we've never produced. What else? Actually, I'm with Stefan on the Morvedra, a block we planted ourselves about 5 years ago, and it's getting a little more mature. So like to see what that does. It's tiny, but still should be fun. That's a grape I like too.
Will the Sauvignon be a single varietal wine?
That's the goal. That's the goal, but we'll see. I like the idea of staying flexible with all the wines, like to kind of follow the wine a bit, and we always have these goals. We have wines that we expect to make because we've been making them for years, but like if it doesn't work out in a particular vintage, I'd like to think we're flexible enough to try to follow the wine.
Okay.
Yeah, I also like the community of doing harvest is fun. Like just us all being together and kind of, I think, focused on one thing. It's a sort of selfish time of year where you can like basically disregard the rest of your life because harvest is the excuse for doing that. Which is that has for a while that's fun. Then it gets old and you're glad it's over.
Okay.
But
yeah, you must have had quite a few harvest interns come through here, 20 years in. I'm sure that have been able to learn from you, and probably you've probably taught quite a few.
Well, yeah, we've had a lot of interns. I think I'm a terrible teacher. Connor and Stefan are better teachers than me. I tell the interns that if they should learn from these guys, not from me. But yeah, we've had. I mean, Stefan started here as an intern. Connor started here as an intern. I guess in a way, Kelsey started here. Like, so they're still here. We've had some great interns over the years. I'm trying to think if like any of them are around here in Sonoma County anymore. There are some. There's some that are still like some in the wine business. Some did it for fun one year. Weren't necessarily like planning careers in winemaking. We've had some European folks here that are back at home making wine, and I do think that like especially in that situation, like because there are a lot of differences between what people are doing in Europe, like small differences, but still, that it's fun to probably for them to come here and just like pick up a few things that we do here that they can take home. And, a lot of times we learn things from the interns too, like stuff that they just did differently in their family wineries or whatever wineries they worked at. And like, we can pick up stuff here from them too.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah. Kind of learning opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, I'm sure plenty of things here that we do that could be improved, but sometimes they just get stuck in your way and you don't know how to improve them.
What are some of the changes in the last 20 years, I guess, that you've seen? I know you mentioned, as you were starting, kind of, wine prices climbing, a lot of post sideways kind of era. Any overarching changes that you've seen from the winemaking side in that time period?
Yeah, I think, everything has changed in 20 years. Starting with the grape growing, like climate is so different now. Like I think up till a few years ago, we'd never harvested a grape in August. And then what year was it? Maybe it was 2019 or something. We harvested half of our grapes in August. Okay. That was a little unusual, but that had never happened. now it's like we're almost always done by the first week of October with picking grapes. And we used to pick grapes into November. So it changes. I mean, that changes things dramatically. It changes the chemistry of the juice that you're bringing in, which changes the winemaking. And we've had to adjust kind of like when we pick, and like I feel like think more about the style of wine that we're making and like how to get there. We tend to lean towards like wanting to make somewhat lower alcohol wines with somewhat higher acid levels, and picking early is part of doing that, but you can't just pick early, like, based on the calendar. Otherwise you end up with these really green wines. So you kind of have to like play with the grape growing a bit, and then sun exposure, all these things. Like a lot of that stuff, I feel like we just think about it much more than, or at least I think about it much more than I did 20 years ago. And it's easier to screw up these days too. And then, the wine world has changed from 20 years ago being hugely, at least in my world of wine, and hugely like Parker and Spectator influence, to where that's like, I know that those are still, they still have their role, but there's a whole like world of wine that's not really, doesn't pay attention to that, like that we're able to sort of exist in without scores from those publications. And that's a big change too. I think there's more like niches and sort of micro communities within the wine world than at least I felt like there were 20 years ago.
Okay. Felt like it was a sort of a larger umbrella kind of wine before. Now it's broken up a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's consumers for a lot of different styles, and I mean, and I guess also, now there's social media. We didn't have social media 20 years ago. That affects everything, but certainly wine as well. So you can, people, you can kind of advocate for yourself in a way that really wasn't doable back then. There's podcasts, there's all these things, where really back then there was just like the Spectator and Parker. There wasn't much else.
Yeah, so you don't have to rely on sort of traditional media to get your message out. You can do it yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and really, like, you're talking about a small handful of people that did those tastings, and if you weren't falling into kind of what they liked, then you were kind of screwed. Like, not to say that they like, it was just a certain style, like, that we didn't push into that hard, so it didn't. Yeah, but like, I mean, there's plenty of other things there's also more wineries, more vineyards, I think, like, more awareness of wines from around the world. Like I said, I think it feels to me like everything's changed in 20 years.
Maybe by the standards of the day, you started making a little lighter style of wine. Did you have any kind of pushback with that at the beginning?
Tons of pushback. People used to always, they would call our wines hippie wines.
Okay.
Like they were, unfiltered, lower alcohol, kind of like crunchier type wines, and which doesn't mean they like wouldn't necessarily buy them, but it did sometimes mean people wouldn't buy them, and also with no scores. And so that was probably the hardest part, was like, to even get an appointment in a lot of restaurants, you had to have scores, like before they would even taste the wines. Okay. So, we were always kind of looking for the like fringe wine buyers, and, places that I guess like we felt would like fit what we were doing. We were like very much seeking out like, hopefully, like people that would be receptive to what we were doing, but they were few and far between.
Yeah. Now I guess you're being able to get your message out, and wine shops are a lot different than they used to be. I mean, just the variety of them, I think. Yeah, one thing that changed the landscape here for California wine was the whole like New California thing, and John Bonet, and I think he did us a huge service by kind of advocating and bringing awareness to California in general, but like also like a younger generation of winemakers, and
different style of wine and just kind of like pushing consumers to kind of break the mold a little bit about what they were looking for and get more experimental. And I think the spirit of that has continued. And it's a wider range maybe now, but I think there's a lot more consumers that are a lot more adventurous with wine these days, which is great. It's like great for us. I think it's great for, everybody really.
Yeah. Gives you a place for the, like the Solano Valdegui and wines like that you're able to make, I guess.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, Valdegui is a really good example of something that was, I think we started bottling Valdegui that was labeled Valdegui in 2006, and it was impossible to sell. We really liked it. We stuck to it. We liked the vineyard is like kind of a special place, and so we felt very committed to it. But it was damn hard to sell, and when I first saw the vineyard, I'd never heard of Valdegui, and then basically once, and it was hard to become an expert on it because there were no Valdeguis around. Right. And so we just like started making it and kind of working our way through it and trying to figure out how it would present itself in a way that we liked. And then when, going out to sell it was, same thing. Nobody had ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Even though it's this grape that's been in California for a long time, it just, nobody had ever heard of it. And so and then it's like, really tart and like just a different kind of wine than what was being sold in those days. Still, even now, still kind of a different kind of wine. But definitely easier to find an audience for it today.
Yeah, I guess Valdegui probably in particular, it suffered because it was called Napa Gamay. So even if you can't even look back really and see like a history of it under Valdegui really. Like, I mean, I know you make a Charbonneau, but that's like, you can actually go back and find something called Charbonneau.
Yeah. And I like, that's right. Like probably, whenever we first started selling it, it was maybe like 2007 or something. There were still a lot of buyers around, like where if you did say it's the same thing as Napa Gamay, then they'd be like, oh yeah, like not familiar with Napa Gamay, but had heard of it. Like, but now that's gone now. Like now we're kind of in an era where nobody remembers Napa. Buyers are younger, and it's like we're far enough out from that like they're actually probably more likely to be familiar with Valdegui than Napa Gamay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelsey, what drew you into the wine industry?
I started working in wine during the pandemic in 2020. I was in event production before and lost all of my work and had always thought about it, and was like in the wine club in college and just wrote a couple wineries to see if I could help out, and then it stuck. Yeah.
Okay. So you started out kind of right away you knew you wanted to go into the production side?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Is your previous experience been in Sonoma also?
It was, originally in Forestville, and then the winery I was at moved to the East Bay, to Richmond.
Okay.
And then that just didn't make sense for me to do that commute anymore.
Okay. Yeah. Stefan, what about you? What was your entry into the wine industry?
I grew up around it. Growing up in the Napa Valley, my family was in the restaurant business and also working at wineries out there. So had some early exposure there. And then, let's see. Yeah, I was also in the FFA program in my high school. Mm. So we ended up, a bunch of my friends, we were on like the vine pruning team, if you can believe that. And so we were doing that. That was pretty fun. And there was also a winemaking course there in the high school. So took that as well. And so it was cool to just get to be a part of it, because you see all that, you grow up around it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing really for kids in that Napa Valley, it's all geared towards that tourism. And so it's cool to be able to contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, kind of meandered through the years, kind of working an odd job here, working an odd job there in a winery, and bounced around doing harvest for a while until I ended up here.
Okay. Nice. Found a place you stuck with.
Yep.
How about over the last 5 years or so with the pandemic and then there's a lot of talk about wine sales, obviously, now. How have you guys been able to adapt and sort of ride it all out with a lot of changes over the last 5 years or so?
I think we're still trying to figure that out. We're definitely probably riding it out more than we're adapting.
Okay.
I guess I believe that we will stick to what we know. I'm leaning into that more than trying to make big changes. I mean, maybe if we had an idea of like a big change to make, we would try it, but I think we don't know. So, I came into this because I really like wine. So I think that's always been what's like kind of kept me interested, is that I enjoy wine. And so that's, I try to, I think at this point, stick to like why we're interested, like follow the wine, stay interested in wine. It's difficult. I mean, the pandemic was difficult because, we lost all on-premise business, and we do a fair amount of wine in kegs. I mean, I guess we did like during that time kind of pivot into doing box wine instead of keg wine. So we had we could move all of our production that would normally go into kegs into a restaurant bar setting into a retail setting. But then we've kind of switched back to kegs since the world has opened up again. I guess also during the pandemic, we were lucky to have vineyards and have places for to keep working, but to kind of separately work. Like everybody else, it was an interesting time, and it was kind of like a daily adaptation just to trying to look out for everybody's safety, I guess. But now the whole wine sales thing I think is a more recent thing, and we're definitely talking about it, thinking about it, but we don't have it figured out. I think we make wines that are good value, and I think no matter what, people are always looking for a value, not just in wine but in everything. So I think that's our strategy.
Yeah. Lynn, anything to add to that?
I think just last night we coined the term something like "stay alive in 25,"
Okay.
something like that. No, it's been. I think we did a lot of newsletters and sort of sharing our story more with people, and I'd like to do that more. I think we could share ourselves more with the world. But and on that note, we did come out with this new impact report that Kelsey worked really hard on, and we're really proud of.
Nice.
And but we haven't told anyone really about it yet.
Would you like to say anything about it?
Well, it is on the website, and we will. Okay, the plan is let's write a press release, let's put out a newsletter, let's make an Instagram post. Oh my goodness, it's these things seem so hard. I don't know why, but so that I would say is one thing that I hope we continue to do more and better, and things like that. I think the wine's great. I think the prices are great. All of that stuff is dialed in. It's so I don't know what else there is to add besides that, but that's what I think of.
Yeah. So it's like an environmental impact report. Or
That's the overlying.
Okay.
There's some fun things in there, and there's some wine industry stuff in there, or how kind of, I guess environmental impact report, but also there's some economic stuff in there.
Okay.
And, just trying to be transparent. I think, and it's also a good way. I mean, we really, actually, Kelsey should talk about this, because it's without her, we wouldn't have done this. But I like that it's a written record of where you're at, so that you have a place to you can reference that and then try to improve on it. And and it's something we plan to do every year. And so it's a way to kind of I guess benchmark ourselves and see how we also put future goals in there. So we're kind of hold ourselves accountable for those to try to realize those goals?
For me, I was really inspired by Counterculture Coffee does a transparency report every year, and I get really nerdy and obsessed about it. And working here and learning about all of the accomplishments that have taken place over the years that most people don't really know about, and Kenny and Lynn would share, would be like, wait, what? You did this and this and this. And, it's like part of the ethos and what draws people to Hobo is just we just do what we do. And so I wanted to take that a step further and look at what the inside looks like. And so, looking at how long we've had relationships with growers and how many tons we brought in, and what was our biggest lot and our smallest lot. And then even looking at, like the percentage of what's organic versus non-organic, and seeing where we're actually doing better than we thought. And then areas where it's shining the light on, we're like, oh, there's some room for improvement. And I think in the wine industry, there can be a lot of like greenwashing and using farming practices as marketing keywords. And I think it's important to educate, our consumers and partners about what we're actually up to.
Awesome. Were there any big surprises for any of you on it?
That Kelsey can turn spreadsheets into amazing, colorful graphs. What is that? Yeah. No, but more seriously, I don't know. Anyone else? Anyone?
Not surprises, but it's nice to have it in like one package and like be able to look at everything like in together versus like, to me, a lot of the things that are in there felt like really unrelated, I guess, or just like different parts of the business and like things I didn't think about in one like thought, and now we have it together, and it's like a snapshot of your business. Yeah, I guess not a surprise, but it's really helpful to have this. It's a tool, like hopefully a tool for our customers, but also a tool for us. One of my goals is to like hopefully forever like continue to improve what we do, and I think you have to sort of assess what you do to be able to improve what you do, and so this is a great tool for like assessing what we're doing now so that we can improve what we're going to do in the future.
Yeah, so it just made it a lot more digestible, maybe some of that info being all in one place you can kind of reference. And
yeah, and like I said, like having it on paper or whatever on the website or you know, digital, like having it written down, I think it creates a certain amount of accountability. And like when you talk about things, you can forget about what you talked about, but once it's written down, it's like, okay, this is where we were. If we haven't made improvements next year, it's like we have to hold ourselves accountable for that. Like, we can't celebrate if we don't improve things.
Yeah. In Hobo, you've been doing a lot with 1% for the planet for a while, I think, right?
Yeah.
Long.
2018.
Yeah, I guess so. 5 or 6 years.
It's in the report, probably.
5 or 6 years. Yeah, we're a member of 1% for the planet across all the brand. Everything we do is a member of 1% for the planet.
Okay.
So it's not just like one brand. It's across the entire company, and like every dollar that we bring in is part of it. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly a platform to sort of donate money to nonprofits that do environmental work. I guess probably a couple years before we actually joined, I read the book, what's it called? Like Let Your People Go Surfing. And got really inspired by this idea that you don't have to be like a front line climate warrior to be doing something. Like you can do what you do and use that to like help the people that do the frontline work. Like do what you do best. Like that's kind of the book goes into all kinds of things, but one of the things is like do what you do best, and and then you basically use revenue from your business to like help the people that are doing the frontline work. And that was really made a big impact on me. And it became a goal to join. And like when you start thinking about like 1% of gross revenue, 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but like when it's 1% of gross revenue, it is a lot. And so it took us probably 2 years to wrap our heads around how we could afford it. And then I don't think we ever did wrap our heads around it. It was just more like we needed to do it. We like Lynn and I both felt very strongly that it was like we need to be doing something. We did like we feel strongly that a business has a role to play in a community, and that we needed to like, and that this was a way to do it. And then it's an adjustment the first year, but now it's like just part of our budget, and and it's very rewarding to like climate and environmental things, like what keeps me up at night. It's like causes like huge amounts of anxiety for me, and like I don't know that we're like fixing the problem, but at least I feel like we're doing something. And you know, within our own business, we've tried to mitigate our effects on the environment as well, and like be a better business environmentally, and also think about it, and like think about what we can do to improve. And again, that's like part of the impact report here, is like having a way to assess that.
Yeah, you are a climate and environment based business. I mean, growing grapes.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, one of the ways they described it, I went to a 1% for the Planet event last week, and they described it as your impact tax.
Okay.
And that felt very fitting for a business that has such a direct relationship to the land. And, you know, the wine industry has all of its own inherent impacts. And so it feels really rewarding that we're able to financially contribute our impact tax.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to describe it.
I think too is like it keeps it in the forefront of our like thinking, so that, and like the more aware of it we are, then the more like motivated we are to change what we're doing. And you know, it's like the entire environmental effect of like our business, like the more we think about it, the more we're going to be wanting to change it for the better, hopefully.
Yeah. Are there any changes that come to the top of your head that you've made in the last few years? I mean, I know you said you do kegs, obviously, and wine in a box, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly vineyard practices that go along with like organic farming, but like no till and trying to create better habitat in the vineyard, less materials, less spraying, you know, really trying to pay attention to like what the weather's doing, and make decisions where you're thinking about the impact, like the downstream impact of what you're doing, versus like what your risk is at that moment. So like that kind of vineyard stuff, we've, you know, taken a lot of steps to like mitigate the carbon footprint of our package. The winery, we've done some stuff winemaking wise. I feel like we rack less, like just so there's less cleaning of the barrel, like just kind of like slight changes in the winemaking, like a little bit less movement. Like we cold stabilize some of the white wines, but trying to do that at the same time so we can turn on our glycol chiller like at once and get that done, versus like, you know, having it on all year long, like things like that. The winery is part of this thing called Evergreen, which is part of Sonoma Clean Power. So the winery is powered entirely on renewable, sustainable energy.
Okay.
That's been, I think, the last 10 years actually on that.
Oh, wow.
Like a lot of this stuff goes back more than a couple of years. But it's a work in progress, like continually, like if looking for better solutions. We're still too small of a business to really, like, we can't change the way glass is manufactured. Like we can have an opinion about it. Like we can tell our sales reps that what our opinions are, but I don't think the glass manufacturing companies are like taking like really, you know, collectively, like if everybody's like, you know, looking for better solutions, they will start to make changes. And they are like, a lot of them have like greened up their businesses too. And like, we're willing to pay premiums for better things, like more environmental, lower carbon footprint solutions to things.
It seems like you use pretty light glass already.
All the glass is lightweight. All the labels are post-consumer recycled paper and printed with green inks. No foils or capsules on anything. Yeah.
Did you get any pushbacks with the foil and capsules?
We did. I think we stopped using capsules in the 2005 vintage, and yeah, then we did. Like, it wasn't. There was a couple of places that wouldn't buy our wine because of no capsules, and then it's like you have like it's a problem with like export to Canada. They won't. You have to have some sort of like quote unquote tamper resistant like seal on the bottle. So we actually do have to either wax or capsule anything we ship to Canada. Yeah, there was some pushback, but very little these days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's 2005. There probably weren't too many others doing it at the time. What do you think?
I didn't know of anybody. Actually, I saw like at some point I saw somebody had bottled. I can't remember who, but somebody bottled a wine with a clear capsule, and so you could it looked like there was no capsule. And I actually, when I first saw it, I thought it didn't have a capsule. I was like, oh, that looks pretty good. Then it just made us think about the cost of capsules. We were using tin capsules at that time. They were expensive. And I like saw this bottle. I was like, that looks pretty cool. Like, maybe we just like, then you like do some like, now that we're not really worried about like rats like chewing through corks, like the capsule is kind of just aesthetic. So like, we just decided to save the money and like not use the capsules anymore. Yeah. It wasn't, I don't think we were like, we didn't realize like it wasn't a carbon footprint decision at that point. It was a financial decision. But it serves both purposes.
Yeah. Not storing bottles in your old British castle underground.
Yeah. Or shipping port from Portugal to England or whatever it is.
Yeah. Anything you guys would like to talk about the mist or the close to your heart?
Well, maybe like to save face on my intro. Well, I mean, just sitting here thinking about your question, I realize like, I don't know that I've given it much thought because I have been doing this for so long. It seems like it just seems like it's my life, and I don't separate like the wine industry from my life or something. I don't think about it in a different way. It's sort of just like all integrated and all the same. And so I didn't have like a good answer. And I don't know that I still do, but I just maybe want to like get over my stage fright there and just say that. So
yeah. No, it is just your life. So yeah, breaking it up, I understand it doesn't necessarily always make sense.
Yeah, it's hard to be like on this day, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this is going to be our 23rd harvest. I still like what we're doing or what I'm doing. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the people around me. I think like making wine is still, it's like all these, like a lot of these changes we've been talking about, it makes it fun. Some of them like, climate change is like scary. I would trade that in for less fun, I guess, but it does keep things interesting. It's what makes wine interesting too, is it's this like, it's always changing. Every year is different. Even once you've bottled a wine, it's continuing to change. And it's fun to figure these things out. And it's fun to have a good group of people around to figure it out with. And that, all the way from growing the grapes to making the wine to selling the wine, it's all a challenge, and it's all like, I guess like ever changing for one reason or another. Yeah. But I'm really grateful to be doing this for as long as I have, and I guess that's all I got.
What's the best place for people to get your wines? Are there any wines, new releases or anything coming up, or on the website or anything?
I feel like we're kind of always bottling and releasing wines. It's like a regular, like probably every 2 months we have new wines, and but like we have a website, you can buy wine there, but we also have like, especially here in the Bay Area, like have pretty good distribution, and I think the wines are fairly available. And the wines are in, I don't know, 40 states or something like they're available. They're around, they're out there, especially in like, I think smaller wine shops and, restaurants and stuff like that.
So everything I see about you, Kenny, mentioned skateboarding. How big was it in your life?
Skateboarding was like incredibly important to me in my life. Like all of my best friends from growing up I met skateboarding. I think it was like, always an outlet for me in terms of just fun. Like, I mean, it was fun, but also any kind of like stress I've ever felt in my life was like relieved on a skateboard. And like inspired me to travel, inspired like kind of, I think a lot of my thinking about, who I am, what I like it's like very interwoven into my identity. Yeah, just that was like, I think, I used to say like my idea about like what our business was, or in the wine business, was like we were like a skateboard company making wine instead of skateboards. I don't know that we ever really fully realized that, but I liked the idea of trying to do that. Yeah, it's like definitely like the besides Lynn, probably the most influential thing in my life.
Thanks for listening today. Kenny and Lynn and the rest of the crew have really worked hard to provide wines that are farmed organic or beyond at reasonable prices. They make a wide range with something for everyone and every occasion. You can find their wines at hobowines.com or follow them at Hobo Wine Company on Instagram. You can follow the podcast on wherever you're listening and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast, and feel free to email indiewinepodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or feedback. If you could tell your wine friends about the podcast too and help spread the word, I'd really appreciate it. Rating or subscribing helps too. There's also a Patreon if you choose to support the podcast monetarily to allow for more episodes and to help defray other costs like travel, research book purchases, things like that. Any amount is appreciated. I have a small token of my appreciation to send to you also if you do. The link is in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Have a good one.